I think the most beautiful thing for me is my spiritual journey started in car rides with my father when he would come home from 18-hour shifts. And in the 6 hours he had left, he would spend time with me to maybe take me to Kmart at the time, which was like the Walmart. And it was literally a 5-minute drive from our home, but we'd be back in 2 hours. And we were supposedly supposed to get groceries for my mom, but he would just drive immensely, just slowly and sit with me in the parking lot, and he would share, like, prophetic stories. He would share stories about Sufi saints. He would share stories about his childhood in India, and every time he would even tell a story about our prophet, peace be upon him, like, tears would well in his eyes. He would never have told a story that tears in any prophet, and it was so emotional to a point that there was really no right or wrong. There was no black or white. There was no judgment. It was all an exudement of love and mercy and forgiveness. And it kind of tainted me in a bad way, which I'll explain later, because he really taught me the quality of character in prophetic wisdom. It wasn't as easy as a woman is supposed to be like this. This is this rule. That's that rule. There was not as much focus on any of that. It was just, what are your intentions? And when you go through life with your intentions, how are those intentions going to carry you into the betterment of your own life? And it was as simple as that. And I think as I evolved, and especially when I went to UC Berkeley, the first week I was scared because you're kind of thrown into this ocean of, like, these people, like classes of 600 from like a high school of 30 students in the class. And you feel like, I want to identify, I want to make friends. And I think I was really overwhelmed. I wasn't expecting to be thrown into so much diversity. And I didn't wear hijab, in fact, at the time when I was in high school. I was senior class president. I was nominated for homecoming queen. And I feel like the people that I met were very different. The first thing someone asked me is, "Are you Sunni or are you Shia?" And I was like, "I
Mm,
don't know." And I had to call my dad. I'm like, "Dad, am I Sunni or am I Shia?" And he's like, "Why are you asking?" And as time kind of passed, and honestly, Jonathan, I started like somehow conforming ideologies to people who were very focused on the lack of intentionality. Why are you not wearing hijab? Why are you da 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 da? And maybe in order to even seek acceptance and friendship, I altered my thoughts and framework of what my father originally taught me, and kind of
mm,
became something that I don't even think I wanted to be, just to have friends in a circle that I felt like I needed to survive the college life.
mhm.
And in short, I mean, things evolved later in my life, but that's kind of where it began, and sometimes where it kinda led me in a way that wasn't really authentic to myself.
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense. I look back at my childhood. My parents were very loving, but I wasn't around something that I heard as a conscious spiritual experience and practice and sharings like your father shared with you. And it's really beautiful to hear that because as a child, you were probably extremely innocent and open and all of this. And then all of a sudden, here's this man exuding the same innocence as a child, but with the wisdom of an older person. And for you to have that as like your first kind of relationship in some way of interacting with somebody with such authenticity and such love and such non dogma and not having to label it to me is so beautiful and so, in my mind, so right on. And I think so much complication and confusion happens with the labels and the separations. And what are you? Are you this? Are you that? And you're like, well, I'm a human being who loves God or loves whatever you would call it. And it is very difficult at times to navigate because all of a sudden you're at Berkeley and you're like, hey, here I am. I'm this person. And now people, well, what group are you going to be in? Are you going to
Yeah,
be in
yeah,
this group or
exactly,
that group?
exactly.
And then all of a sudden it starts making us feel like we're being put in a box where nobody is meant to be put in a box. And I think that causes so many problems for us as humans trying to fit in, which I get because we want to be a part of a tribe, but to lose ourselves to fit in seems like the opposite of what really we want to do. So for you personally, say with your father and on that journey before you got to college or even high school, was the essence of spirituality just part of your daily life and very real for you? Like, was it as real as talking about something else, like the weather or food? Was it a big part of your reality with your father?
I mean, it was so hard because my entire childhood, keep in mind there was only 6 hours and he should have been sleeping, but to that, it was really, so many times, it was almost daily, and it really what it was, from the age of 5. And it wasn't just spirituality in the sense of just religion, because it was like, "Hey, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story." Because sometimes when you look at someone's life, Jonathan, Like, I was talking to one of my best friends who was widowed at 23 with 4 kids, and she had
Wow.
to make this very difficult choice to stay in this country versus going back to Afghanistan. And I was talking to her and I said, if your life had altered, I could have seen you as a OBGYN doctor. And she
Mm,
said, "You know what, Shabana, my daughter just said that to me yesterday that I would have been a doctor if I had the opportunity." And for my father, I think he could have been a scholar. I think he could have done so much more than what he had to do to kind of, mitigate the future for me and my brother. So sometimes even who you could have been versus who you are might just be the victim of where you are, your financial or economics or just your situation in general. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think when my father was spending time with me, especially when he should have maybe been resting and offering me the quality of that knowledge, he was imparting in me things that formed my identity in ways that I can't even begin to speak to.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So what was it like? I don't remember my childhood very well, so if you don't, I totally get it. But if you do, what was it like, say, if you were going to school or different places and you felt that you had this wisdom that your father was sharing with you for so long? And I'm guessing most likely people around you, maybe kids around you, weren't really communicating in that way or interacting with that awareness. Did you feel like it was hard to fit in, or you were just yourself and it was easy to fit in? What was that like for you?
It's really interesting you asked that because when I was younger, so we moved into a house, a neighborhood that didn't have. So basically, it's kind of a funny story, but it's not. But so we went to this elementary school, and I kept on saying the F word because I was in kindergarten, and the older kids would come and teach the kindergartners the F word. So I got soap in my mouth, the traditional punishment, and I kept on doing it like F this, right?
Yeah.
And so my mom talked to my dad at the time, and they put us in St. Edward's and Fremont Christian until 4th grade. And I loved it. I loved St. Edward's. I loved Fremont Christian. But then for them as Muslim parents, it kind of became a little bit of a conflict of interest because they didn't force us to go to mass. But it was like, you've got the whole world in his hands. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh my God. So now there's like another problem. Like, okay, we're putting her in a private Christian school. And then it became a situation, well, let's move into a public school that has a really good quality school. And at that move, unfortunately, and by the beginning of 4th grade, I went into the move with a pretty concrete home life, but I was very badly bullied. I was at that time in Fremont, compared to now, there's all Indians, all Asians, lots of Indian grocery stores. And at that time, if there was an Indian in the Bay Area, you knew who they were, like the whole Bay Area. It's like 3 Indians. Hey, let's hang out, right? 3 Indian families. And so for me, from a transition of remembering like my little girlfriends, Andrea and Christina and Mary, and even my teachers, and feeling love and security, to now thinking that my parents had wished better for me in a way to kind of cultivate not losing the concept of what we wanted to hold to religion, and now being bullied and being called an effing Gandhi literally every day for 2 years, being hit, and then not really being able to translate it even to a principle or have it manifest. And it wasn't because I was any more spiritual. I just think I was different. Fortunately, with that led to other problems for me because then by the time I'm in a junior high now, and I finally have kind of identified friends, they're the kind of friends that are the friends that are doing other things. But it was a struggle for reasons that not really having to say of like, I was maybe deeper in wisdom and spirituality and they were not. There was more of like social racial struggles and then also trying to navigate that with the softness of my heart. But to answer your question in a little bit different way, my father, in teaching me all these wonderful premises of forgiveness, has led me to be, at times, especially in the past 3 years, extremely naive. My naivety is not really that I may not know someone's hustling me or lying to me. My naivety stems from I am told that I'm supposed to give someone the benefit of the doubt until proven guilty themselves. My naivety is to know that I'm supposed to still offer forgiveness and separate personal like and dislike to what is right to do by that person. So it has become a situation where because I've gotten the standard of high capacity to understand kind of a wisdom that is so spiritual and so kind and pure, but it's tainted the reality of my experience because it's kind of I hate to say it, screwed me over in ways
Uh,
that have burned me alive. And yet I have to still get up and try to function and process not only for myself, but with his wisdom, but then what is someone else thinking or doing that they could do so much harm and yet not atone for it or not apologize for it, you know?
yeah, and I think there's from my experience and perspective, I think there's a spiritual wisdom and awareness, like you're saying, that you can see more with people sometimes. And you can go, wow, this is a unhealthy, negative, dangerous, whatever it may be in the situation, energy from this person. And I need to be able to know that there's a soul there, but also do the right thing as a human to make sure that I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually safe. And I think sometimes in my experience of spirituality, sometimes it would be overboard of me taking responsibility for everything and not giving that person responsibility. And one of my friends who's a therapist, he's like, sometimes spiritual people overdo that in his perspective of, if somebody is wrong, we shouldn't carry that. We can still understand there's a soul there and that they're looking for love on some level. But just like a child that's out of control, we are not going to let them be in charge of the moment. And I think it's a very interesting thing with spirituality, refining it where we embrace all of humanity while we also keep things safe for us and others. And I've gone to places spiritually and emotionally that were not safe. And I learned a lot of this from realizing that I was overly accepting and naive and trusting and just having complete faith and not using discernment of like, hey, you know what? No, that's not okay. Like, I'm not going to participate in that. So, I think it's an interesting thing with humanity and spirituality and really trying to refine how we live in a way that feels healthy and loving to us and others, not just others. That's to me really important.
I'm not telling you the fun part. Let me tell you the fun part. So the fun part is that my mom is the opposite of my dad.
Wow.
And I only say this because it was an anomaly to be raised in their family because you have a soft, huggable, loving father who's forgiving in a way that is immeasurable. It seems prophetic. Like, what?
Wow.
And when I say this, I think what I'm speaking to is like normal culture of people is like if a dog is a human being, for example, and they bite you, then when the dog is laying on the street suffering, you're gonna be like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
great, dog is dying, what's up?" Right? Or even the concept of like, now the dog bit you and now you're, the president of the United States and you're like, "Hey, guess what, dog? Look at me," right?
Yeah,
That's just
totally.
natural human instinct. And that
Yeah,
my
yeah.
dad taught me, wait, now the dog is suffering. You may not wanna bring it to your home, but give it water and take it to a hospital, right? Don't gloat in their
Yeah,
misery.
yeah, that's beautiful.
And no need to also be like in the minute of like, okay, now you hurt me and you wished bad upon me. And now I've moved on and have become successful. Then now
Yeah,
I'm going to come back and have to show you because that
yeah,
kind of mentality is so normal to feel that. But it's really not normal in spiritual elevation. There's no need
yeah,
for that.
right on. Right
But
on.
the other thing about my mom that I was saying is my mom she's still alive. My dad passed away, but she's not a very huggy kind of woman. She's very strong to a point that Muslim males who are like dominant males have said that they're intimidated by my mother.
Wow.
She is a vocal human being. She is a fighter. She will never allow anyone to push her around. She will always stand for what's right. She's disciplined, on time, and a fashionista. So it's a problem. It's a huge
Yeah,
problem
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the sense because it made me who I am. Because sometimes I've had Muslim women, for example, like if I'm in the mosque and I have a question and I want to access maybe the imam who's upstairs, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna go speak to him?" I'm like, "Well, I can't reach him from downstairs." I'm like, "Well, up there and ask him, you're gonna go in the men's section." Yeah. So when we live in America,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna go in the men's section. I'm gonna ask my question, right? And that kind of an ability to kind of feel inhibition with faith comes from both of them. But having a mom of such strength and such, I mean,
Mhm.
she's so strong, has really given me a center of being a little bit of my dad's softness in combination to the ability to be kind of a ruthless, cutthroat, my badass vocal woman. And it's not
Mm,
something that most people always see in the framework of cultural dynamics of being Muslim. And sometimes the vocalness is not as condoned culturally, not religiously, but
mhm.
culturally. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting when you're speaking, I was thinking of a Tai Chi. They have some expression, I may say it wrong like I often do, but it's like steel wrapped in cotton. So it's like there's a power underneath, but there's a softness on the outside, but it could be flipped, right? It could be like steel on the outside, but cotton on the inside of like, okay, I'm putting up this strength like your mother, but inside I have my father's softness. But I see that in this moment, this strength or this clarity is what's needed in the moment to have that freedom, which I think is really cool as long as we feel like we're identifying what feels authentic for us. So I'm really curious because, like, for me, when I started this podcast, it was this idea of one spirit, many paths. And the way I see it, I know we all have our own perspective, is there's some magical spark of life, whether people want to call it God or universe or love, or whatever word resonates with them, that we all come from. And then it feels like, again, this is just my perspective, that from there, like these different religions or philosophies or things branch off from, say, if the arm is God, and then there's all these things coming out of it in different ways back into God. What is your way or some of your practices as you from your father, but also as a Muslim woman, if you would share, like, what is it like internally? How do you practice connecting to God or love or universe? If you're open to sharing some of the inner journey so we all can understand better.
For me, first of all, the premise of the height of my understanding from my father is the intentionality always. So even if the outcome is something that you need to forgive yourself for, intention is always the center. The intention being the center, I think there's a lot to answer in that. I think a couple things is that I think first of all, with religion and spirituality, I think it should always cultivate unity. I don't think it should divide. And I think any human being who feels that they cannot participate in difference. For example, there's some Muslims who may not want to go to a gathering that there's music playing, or they may not want to go to a co-ed wedding. And it seems very extreme, and I can understand it. But in my cultivation, what my father taught me, he really did teach me how to be able to still keep my standards and not compromise them, and yet still mingle with and gather people and unite with people and try to understand it in so many different frameworks, and how love needs to be as pure as offering love, period, right? It has to be the center of faith. And I think another thing that for me in my spirituality is I think, especially like monotheistic faith, there's always that concept of ranking that, oh, I want to not do this so I don't go to hellfire, or I want to attain this level so I can reach the highest level of heaven. And for me at this point, in my trust in God, where God places me, whether it's heaven or hell, is not motivating my love for him. It's not like, oh God, I'm going to pray 5 times a day and go to Mecca and do all these things because I want you to get me to this ranking. Because to me, that's a little bit form of a selfish obedience, and it's a little bit of a selfish motivation. And I don't think God really wants that as much as the cultivation of the knowledge and awareness of him, to a point that your trust in him designates his ranking of you in this life not to be the center of your focus. Because when you start
Mm,
operating not out of fear and not out of hope of ranking and purely out of love, then you'll cultivate knowledge. And when you cultivate knowledge, you'll understand that in God's way of knowledge, if he created the rules, he can break the rules, right? So, and I say this only because, for example, like the concept of, just a very simple example, like in our religion, most people are averse to dogs because the spit in the religion is considered makes you impure to being able to do your ablution and pray. So you can
mm,
have a dog, but many people just don't have dogs, and sometimes are even afraid of dogs in the Muslim faith, right? Yet there is a narration in our faith that someone who is immoral in the sense, like maybe even a prostitute, when everybody was ignoring a dog, gave a dog water. So she
mm,
must have been licked by the dog, and she is known in the narration to be of the women of paradise.
mm,
So when you have a rule that somehow God himself created for the Muslims, and yet somehow you see another narration, which my father would teach me, of trying to connect a deeper understanding of what the love should look like.
mm,
Because, like I said, religion should unite, it shouldn't divide. So that's one particular way that I can, and like another really quick story of that my dad would share is like there was a time when the alcohol became abolished in that era, and companions would complain of a companion who was still drinking, and they'd be
mm,
like, "Hey, Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, he's still drinking," and kind of in some ways tattletaling, right? And he said, "Don't worry about him." He said, "He loves me, and his love is
mm,
enough."
mm,
And he heard that, and when he heard that, he was able to stop drinking. And
mm,
so imagine in situations or even, like, moments where, there was a funeral going on, and it was a Jewish procession, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, stood up, and my father said when he stood up, they asked him, like, "Why are you standing up?" Because at the time, they may have been kind of in an enemy situation, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Is it not a soul?" Right?
mm,
So that's the discourse of understanding that I was given in my understanding. And that's why I think in terms of spiritual understanding and practice, that's one root of who I am. I don't let rules dictate what should define my practice. I feel what is comfortable to me should be okay with God in a way that's forgiving to myself. Another simple example, just even of that, is like perfume, right? Most people will say, okay, don't wear perfume because you don't want to arouse somebody. But I know that perfume is medicine for my mental health. So you
Mm.
got me spraying perfume all day. I'm not spraying it because I'm going out there with the intention of alluring a man. I'm doing it because it makes me be sane. Like when I want to maybe cuss my husband out, I'm like, it's like a cheat kind of thing for me, right? I like to dance. I love to dance, right? In fact, I even danced to the Hillsong song at 24 Hour Fitness and Spirit lead me with my faith and in the presence of my Savior. Right? Now, when I think of a Savior, I'm not necessarily thinking of Jesus, but can I dance to the song and do free motion dancing and offer the word, take me deeper than my fate may ever wander, let me still trust. Now, how can this Muslim woman be dancing? First of all, dancing, because it's not really known for a Muslim woman to dance in that way. But I know that I like to dance. I love to dance. So why am I going to have the regulation and then why am I going to allow a song that maybe is designated to Christianity, but I love the lyrics. I love the words. It means something to me. It heals me. So why am I going to say, "Oh, it's a Christian song?" I'm going to take the beauty of it and manifest it to my energy levels.
Mhm.
And another thing that I also love to do is Kundalini yoga. I love to do Kundalini yoga. So in the preface of spirituality, my spiritual journey just is mine and I don't allow rules and regulations that may embody the ideal doctrine based on what other people say to kind of anticipate how I'm going to answer to God or live my life for God or with God. And that's where I come from. But once again, it's rooted back to the intentionality that my father taught me.
I can relate a lot to what you're saying about the love and the intention and not letting a law or an anti-law or anything come before the state of love in ourselves. I think that to me, and every guest I've spoken to and anyone I've ever known in any religion, any spiritual practice, they always talk about love and they always talk about unification, not separation and oneness. And again, one spirit, many paths. So when I hear you speaking, I hear someone that's very free and natural and trusting their intention to connect to love and God. Now, I'm curious how within the Muslim faith tradition practices, what do you do within that? If you're comfortable sharing specific practices or anything in the Muslim world that you actually do that you feel would, I guess, make you a Muslim compared to someone that would just say, oh, I'm a very spiritual person connecting to love and God. Like, what's the difference for you?
I mean, the difference for me is the testimony of faith, which is I declare there is no God but the one God who has no limbs, who has no partner, who has no brothers and sisters, who has no children, and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last messenger. And I say this only because I've performed the Hajj with my parents, and in terms of praying, I'm not perfect at it. There's times where I miss prayer, but I also still try to make them up. But the true, I think for me, thing that identifies me as being a practicing Muslim is that testimony. And at the same time, everything that kind of comes with that in terms of the expectations, I think there's a difference between two things. The manifestation of that expectation from a framework of what you owe God, right? Which is prayer, fasting, giving the zakah, the Hajj, and what you owe humanity. And you can be forgiven by God for maybe me not getting all the prayers done. But if I act wrong with my neighbor or with a cat and I kick a cat, I believe you're going to have to answer more to that than to God's doctrines of rules and regulations itself. Because I don't think God wants you to walk the earth somehow fulfilling the rights of God, but not the rights of other human beings. And
Mhm.
I think that's sometimes where the conflict occurs in understanding faith, because I believe God is so forgiving and so loving that no matter how imperfect I am, that my sins and the sins of all humanity as a whole don't even compare to even one iota of God's mercy. And having said that, I'm at ease and I'm at peace. No matter how messy Muslim I am and crazy and silly I am,
Mm.
I'm very comfortable, but that basically is the only thing that holds to my entity and identification of standard. Everything else, I don't mind messing up and asking forgiveness every day, not being perfect.
Mhm.
And I don't mind being different. I don't mind being me. And I don't know what that looks like, but I believe no religion should allow for anything other than the person feeling comfortable in their faith. And if there's a lack of
Mhm.
comfort in your faith, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, so looking at there was a man on here that is a Sufi teacher, and when I spoke with him, he has meetings, Abraham Brotherhood, I think it was called, an organization that tries to bring the four main religions, he called them, together in the Middle East. And he said when the people are together actually in the meetings, there's not a problem. It's just more the leaders that have problems. So I'm just looking for this, what you're sharing about this oneness of humanity and love and God and the truth of it. Like, how did it, talking about messy, how did it get so messy and confusing with religions attacking and hating each other and saying that one God's better or their God's good or bad, whatever it is, instead of just, hey, you prefer this or this is what you were born into and you prefer this, but we both love God and we both have our way of going there. How do we work together? And it just seems so far away from that for so many people and so extreme. I'm just curious if you have any insight from your perspective of what's happening and maybe any possible solutions.
I mean, intentionality, I think. I think sometimes when we look at war, when I was in Berkeley, one of my favorite books was The Colonizer and the Colonized by Albert Memmi. And it was one of my favorite books because it really talked about how someone who is actually oppressed can become the oppressor. Someone who is actually the victim can become the victimizer.
Mm,
And even sometimes the victimhood can even lead to racial things where one color may seem superior to the other. And sometimes the embodiment of that belief in the standard of the oppression, where so many Indians out there will still feel that fair and white is more superior and beautiful than someone who may be dark skinned. So
mm,
when we're talking about trauma, from even generational trauma with families to even war itself, I think sometimes, once again, it's rooted in intentionality and also sometimes the aftermath of trauma, because sometimes the reality is that things may be happening with the intention of maybe finance or money or land or whatever. And then when you're talking about sometimes two sides, for example, that are constantly fighting, which is wars right now, and then people sometimes saying, okay, well, I'm the one who's being oppressed, or they're right, or they're wrong. And you're trying to resolve the conflict that's really, really huge, that's causing even death and just war. And just, it's so bad. And then people feel helpless. I mean, my answer to that in short is two things. I think number one, giving it to God. I've never gone to a protest for any, I mean, I have back in the day, but recently I don't. My protest for me is waking up at 3 in the morning and crying for children and women in general, and it has nothing to do
mm,
with any just in this region. I get up and I holler at God. I'm like, "God, you have this power, help us," right? Because who can have better help you but God himself
mm,
than all of our protesting or government or whatever. It's God who can cure it. But then that manifests me curing myself, which means when I get up on my day to day, what am I doing to think about what I may have done wrong or I could have done better before I slept? So part of the cure of humanity is really reflecting on what you could have done better when that dog was lying there and you kicked it. You're like, peace out, dog, right? But that's kind of where I think human evolution needs to begin, is within the self, giving it to God. But in terms of these problems and what I think of them, I think they're going to exist until the end of time. And
mhm,
like I said, I think the only solution is to try to embody the light from within. And then once again, be human in your own apology, because man was made to sin, but at least reflect and be honest. I think sometimes that
mhm,
when people are deceitful of things they did, it's like really funny because I mean, this is a really funny story, but I have a kid who kind of got some emotional eating issues, and his father used to always hide like Oreo cookies. And he literally had Oreo cookie stains all over his mouth. And the father kept on asking him, like, "Did you eat the Oreos?" And he was like, "No, it wasn't me." And we were like laughing because we know he ate the Oreos. It's on his mouth, right? But he just couldn't admit as like a young kid that, "No, dad, it was me. I swear to God." And it was just like, kiddo. But then understanding that maybe his inability to admit it is so much more rooted in the problem of that he may need those Oreos as emotional eating, right? So sometimes to kind of delayer sometimes, but then delayering that doesn't remove accountability. And that's kind of the difference in that.
definitely.
Yeah.
And then for you personally, whether it's within your faith or just your own internal practices, when things come up for you inside that really rock you, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, do you have some practices you do that help you bring understanding and love and compassion and healing to them?
So I'll be honest with I believe I have 2 or 3, like, really, 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 like, diehard friends, and I don't think I really want any more because I feel like I've been burned so hard that being able to have even 3 is a lot. But, I mean, having to answer that because people ask me that as the Mercy Queen, like, "What do you do when you're down and out?" I think sometimes it varies, because I suffer from depression. I've had a mental health condition in my life that's been diagnosed, and sometimes it may look as simple as sometimes I need to eat a good meal. Sometimes I need to go distract and go to a movie alone and stuff my face with popcorn. I mean, I know a couple weeks ago, I was kind of not feeling well, and I ended up one night seeing I Love Boosters, which I thought was a hilarious movie. I was cracking my head off, and the next morning, I'm at Is God Is, right? Which is another wonderful movie that came out. And so but then other times it might look like, "Hey, I'm not feeling well, and I need to maybe drink warm milk and honey and go to sleep to make it to the next morning." Sometimes it means listening to Quran, and listening to Surah Taha to calm my mind, right? Sometimes it means going to the gym and dancing in the wet sauna. But then also keep in mind with this answer that you're asking me, Jonathan, and knowing yourself and what heals you, realize that what may heal you could actually harm you at another instance. Meaning, sometimes between wanting to go to a movie and needing to sleep, even if I want to go to the movie, if I
Hmm.
can't drive to the movie because I'm too tired, then I need to sleep, right? But then if I'm like, wait a minute, it's been like an hour and I'm not sleeping, then wait, let me redirect. Maybe I need to go to the movie. Maybe I'm rested. I feel safe enough to drive now. So it's
Yeah.
got to be a self awareness to a human being that has two things: no apology in renderance to what you're supposed to do. Because
Mm.
unless it's harmful to someone, obviously, or yourself, obviously, alcohol and other things. I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying that, like, for me, like, wearing perfume, even if religious scholars are telling me that I'm not allowed to, well, sorry, too bad. You know what I mean? I'm gonna wear
Yeah,
it because
yeah.
if not, I may, hurt somebody. I might, what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. But, and then the other thing, but not apologizing for saying, hey, I like this and I don't like this. And then another thing is just knowing that the same thing, like I said, that might be sometimes it's not Surah Quran that I want to listen to. Sometimes it's a Cardi B song. I
Mm.
may want to put on Bodak Yellow and get that. You know what I'm saying? So the point is that the answer is that there's no answer. It's what you need to do in the moment to make it through the next moment with the wisdom of yourself without apology. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. Like that's the spiritual ninja, the name of this podcast, and I have other things within that. To me, the whole reason I kind of chose that was that using the ninja as something that has to kind of navigate and figure out what's happening in the moment for us to know how to do that for our insides because we're all similar but unique. And to know, like, in this moment, what's going to bring me closest to God. Well, maybe it is going down and whatever, like eating something or cleaning a dish or prayer or meditation or nature or giving someone a hug or calling somebody in need, whatever it may be, to give ourselves that freedom. And I guess some of that goes back to what you talked about earlier about the intention. Because if you say, if you feel pure in your heart of my intention is to love or to be the best person that I can be, then you trust that, you have faith in that, then you can give yourself the freedom of, okay, right now, what really will serve love the most? And to do that fully, like you're saying, and not to feel that, oh, I shouldn't do that because my religion or my faith or my belief system or what my parents told me says not to do that. But if anyone loved us, they would want us to be in state of love. And so if you're doing something that's not harmful to ourselves or others, that to me, I feel is really important in our spiritual freedom of being able to find that sensitivity of what we need and maybe being there for someone else and the sensitivity of not knowing and being open to support them and what they need. And I think that's in my mind, in my heart, in my soul, a very important part of spiritual depth is to give yourself that freedom to know that the wisdom will show you in the moment what seems like the best next step. And then from that, something will open up for the next step and not have to worry about step two. Just trust the authenticity of step one. And I love and can relate to that a lot. I think it's really important because that's freedom. I mean, we all want to feel free and happy and loved and all that. So I really appreciate you honoring that what you learned from your father, let's say, in within your religion and being very comfortable being in your religion and honoring the essence of it with also being true to the essence of you in the way that it's for you. I remember many, many years ago, I went to this martial arts school with a friend, and I think he was like a karate instructor and had this really big following. And he said something, I forgot how he worded it, but he asked somebody, like, what do you teach? And the guy said, like, whatever, jujitsu. And he goes, oh, that's not true. You teach your interpretation of jujitsu. And he was saying how everybody, they could say that they're a karate instructor or Tai Chi, but ultimately they're teaching their interpretation of that. And I think there's a beauty to that, to see that of like you're a practicing Muslim in your unique way. And that's going to be different than someone else if they're making it truthful to their soul and not just following rules or structure or dogma. So I appreciate your courage and your depth to do that, because it does take courage for someone to tell you, what are you doing? That's not right. And you're like, no, but my soul, my heart, my intention is pure. And I'm trusting that. I think that's really so admirable and so beautiful. I think if God was able to sit here and talk and speak with us, it would celebrate somebody being true to the essence of God and not the man made rules of God.
I think the rules can be pragmatically important, but I think sometimes the rules can falter when society falters, right? I don't think the rules itself falter, but when society falters, that's where I think sometimes the rules become a dilemma. And I only say this because for things that necessarily don't make sense in rules, but then I also, like I said, I think the rules should always, no matter what, somehow bring a point to either gathering or mercy. And in terms of like the whole Mercy Queen thing for me, my goal in life right now is to really try to revolutionize like healthy food and then give to a nonprofit model called Miracles for Mercy, which is why the whole Mercy Queen concept was created by me, because my goal is to unite people through the concept of breaking bread. And then I also have like the Mercy Mindset coaching and the Mercy Queen podcast myself to have these dialogues with people. Because even if I had the most amount of money in the world, like more wealth than anyone could imagine in terms of richness and wealth, like I could buy islands and all the land, it's not going to stop war. It's not going to stop people not understanding one another. It's not going to stop the fact that some people, if they have gay neighbors, are gonna be like, "Hey, let's not go over there," right? So where are we gonna meet to like, hey, like even if they're different from us, or a Muslim and a Hindu, one who not only doesn't eat meat, but one who eats beef, and you can't eat beef in the Muslim faith. So where are we gonna come and, like you
Yeah.
said, not have wars and not kill each other and not be able to not understand each other? And that's really where my concept comes from as the Mercy Queen, is to make people realize that mercy is a gift. Kindness should be ordinary, but mercy is a gift. And if we're not able to expand upon mercy for one another on our day to day, and especially to ourselves, we're not going to make it. And I think sometimes that's where I'm at in my journey, is trying to offer that openness to people and hoping they'll be willing to be open to me as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear you. I think the greatest thing we could do is connect to the deepest place in ourselves, love, God, universe, whatever someone wants to call it, and live from there and honor that the best that we can and honor that in others the best that we can. Now, also, I find for people that are doing what we're speaking about, that often, just like you just mentioned for yourself, there's some expression outwardly that they feel very pulled to or called to, whatever the words would be for you. And you start creating, you're talking about the different things you've created. So within creating on the outside, I find there's a real sensitivity of listening inside and trusting and taking that next step and kind of seeing where something wants to go, as opposed to forcing something, but also like having something that feels like you want to do or I want to do, and taking little steps to get there and having the courage to stick on it, even if it's a lot of time, energy, and challenges. So I'm curious for you, when it goes from your spiritual essence to loving and kindness and mercy and all that, what is your process of taking that and then creating something in the world, such as what you've been doing?
I think one thing is it's not centered around money, but it is trying to get finances in accordance so that if I can acquire wealth, I can help a lot of people. But in terms of my process, I mean, another thing you asked earlier is like other things that I like to do besides Kundalini yoga. And I do have the green screen, so maybe we can add it into this podcast. But one of the things I love to listen to is "May the long time sun shine upon you and all love surround you, and the pure light within you shine your way on." And it's a Kundalini yoga song. And the reason I'm answering with that, to answer this question also, is what it may sometimes look like almost in some ways nothingness. And I say this because if you put your hand on your heart real quick, Jonathan, and close your eyes real quick, if you don't mind, and just close your eyes and just listen to my voice. You say you're just a little soul, but within you lies the keys to the universe. Now open your eyes. Now, I think if you live your life realizing that your sorrow, right? And you're in bed and you're depressed and you're feeling sad, your sorrow when you may get up and you may be noticing that person who's homeless and you may not got a lot of money in your pocket, your sorrow can be the seed for another human being to feel value. And that seed doesn't mean that you gotta have a lot of money. That seed may just be walking by someone who's homeless and saying, "Hey, man, sorry that it's cold. I hope you have a good day," right? That could be enough. And the fact that you have the ability in your light to plant that seed out there shows your value deeper than what money or status or power can ever convey. And whether you want to reference that light to God, to Allah, to Jesus, to Buddha, to Krishna, it is a light in your soul that you have the ability to perfect before you die. And that perfection in that light doesn't mean that you're a saint. It means that you may have sinned a whole lot, but that's okay as long as you're willing to work on the light within you.
Mm.
And I think that's where is the preface between my spiritual conduct, right or rules, intentionality, love, to the knowledge sometimes that I also, as a student of mercy, get distracted by. Because there's so many times where I was knocked down and felt worthless myself, and then maybe get a call for someone who needs help and rise to the occasion, even though I'm not feeling well, because the occasion needs to be risen to. And so then it just reminds me that Shabana, like, if you give up and if you just stop because everything breaks you, you're not going to be offering any light, and your light's too valuable to dim for anyone else.
Okay, yeah. That all makes total sense. And then taking that to another level of expression as far as material, for lack of better words, like creating an organization or creating a book or creating anything like that. Is yours very intuitive? You're like, oh, this is the next thing that just feels totally right. What are the main pieces I need to do to help that happen? Like, how do you go from spirituality to creation?
That's really a good question, Jonathan. So I want to say, for one thing, too, is that what I'm doing is my mission, which is what I call the mercy mission. I'm actually taking some of the trauma that I have. The first book that I'm trying to release on a children's level as well as an adult level is Love Me First, Love Me Last, which I'm hoping to be out in a couple of months. One book that I also want to write is called The Bipolar Condition versus Bipolar Disorder. Because I feel to call it a disorder, I think is an offense, but I can understand even theologically why it's called a disorder. Autism is called a
Mhm,
disorder, spectrum disorder. And to label it like that basically in some ways violates the premise of your ability to be without feeling dysfunctional in normal standard. But
mhm,
I understand in diagnostic medical sense why it's done. But I mean, that's another book that I would like to write. Another book that I would like to write is In the Name of Love and Loss, to really talk about managing, visiting sick people as well as handling grief. So when we're talking about me putting things into production, it really is not always easy. But the two advices for people is one, if you have something within you that's a talent or a gift, don't deny it. Because sometimes someone might say, "Oh God, who would buy that necklace that you're making?" Or who thinks you don't sing as good as you think you sing, right? And for the people sometimes that have made it in society in a way with a success story, whether it's Oprah, whether it's someone like Viola Davis, whether it's someone like Cardi B, whether it's someone like even Steve Harvey who used to sleep in his car. When you look at people who may have taken an initiation of a dream and now made it, I also want to tell people that making it isn't really the success. And I only say that because if you can sing, you can sing, right? If you can make something, so just because people may have made it and we can see that doesn't lessen the value of what you may bring to the table, period. That's not that defines the success. Just because you didn't win the
mhm,
Oscar doesn't mean you weren't the best actress.
mhm,
And just having said that, I think sometimes what people tend to do is people, number one, deny their gifts because someone may tell them their gifts aren't worthy. Don't let
mhm,
anybody tell you that your gifts aren't good enough. Never, ever allow anyone to believe that. And number two, if you believe your gift is worthy, go out there and fight for it. But even when
mhm,
you're fighting for it, it's got to be a fight where it's not even a fight at all because the word fight seems like you're trying to prove something. No, just go out there and enjoy it. Go out there and enjoy the practice of believing that whatever you have to offer is beautiful enough to offer it, despite what people manifest as success or failure for yourself. Enjoy it. Enjoy your
That's
gift and
right.
just go out there and let it shine.
No, it's
Superstar,
right on.
you know?
Yeah,
Superstar that shit. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, totally,
Superstar.
yeah.
You know? I mean, that's what you gotta do. It just smells so good, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm being weird now. He's like, okay, this
No,
one.
no, it's right on. No, I hear you. Like for me personally, say for example, this podcaster, I have many books, and I love the creation, the expression, the authenticity of them. And I haven't spent a lot of time with any marketing of them. And I regularly get people for this podcast and for my books being like, hey, this should be out there way more. Let me help you. And you know, it's all like marketing messaging. And I think it's very valuable and I totally believe in it. And yes, I would like my work to reach more people. But for me, I feel like my part is fully in the authentic creation and expression and following through. Like you're saying, like, okay, I'm in the middle of a couple of new books. So I have to make sure I take time to write and stick with it and follow through because I love it and its expression. But if I start doing anything for the external validation, it
Yeah.
loses the expression and the joy. So, like you're saying, the success is fully expressing who we are and our gifts or whatever it may be. And that's the gift, that's the reward. And if it happens to make money or affect more people, that's great. But our intention, going back to your father, I believe if the pure our attention is, the pure our experience is, then that's the winning, that's the result, that's the prize, that's the success ultimately.
It's interesting you say that because I have weapons of mass destruction as a Muslim female. Do you want to hear what they are?
Yeah.
They are the amount of women in the world that pray for me. I have women from Clariana Hotel, who is a Vietnamese woman, from women who are in Sierra Leone to Mauritania to Fiji to United States, San Francisco, and I have women out there, Afghanistan, and these women are very, very pious women who pray for not only humanity, but for my
Mm,
children, for my family, and for me. And I truly believe that at times where maybe I would have even lost my life because I lost hope, I believe it's the prayers of even some of these women who've passed away, that their souls are still on my side.
mm,
And I only kind of mention that in response to what you're saying is because it's definitely true. If you literally touch one human being in a positive way that you may not even believe mattered, you don't realize that the memory of you itself could lead for you to generational blessings
mm,
that they'll take you to the end of time. And so
mm.
understand like the value of trying to just offer light period without any expectation, not only to yourself or even, I mean, that one person because of your kindness that you may have just touched could just be your way, your path, and your beauty that you offered. And it's enough. I think what you're saying is so true. People really sometimes base their success on, oh, and especially my family, because I haven't made money yet. They're like, talk to us when you make money. When you become a millionaire, my mom's like, call me. Otherwise, you're just racking up your credit card and making a fool of yourself. And nobody respects you in the community. And you're just my daughter. And I'm just like this. But even in that, for her, it's like a reality, like also because Shabana, like, stop giving, 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 giving. And you don't have anything. And I'm like, well, mom, God said that if you give one, I will get 10. She's like, where's your 10? Where's your 10? And she asks me all the time, but sometimes I try to explain that maybe my 10 isn't back. Like if I gave $1, I got $10. Maybe my 10 is when my son was born, out among all the kids that I kept on seeing get sick, my son didn't get sick in the COVID baby years, didn't get sick for 4 years. And
Mm,
so when we're talking sometimes about maybe God, he got a mild fever in that age, and all my friends' kids had COVID. All my friends' kids were getting sick. And I only say that because sometimes the reciprocation of what you gave may not be in the way you gave it. It may be something like a miracle in a way that, or a gift from God that are secret that you may
yeah.
have asked him. You know? And so that's why the energy force always has to just try to stay centered to purity of intention and then acting on the best way and then forgiving the bad outcome. Because sometimes the outcomes aren't great. Sometimes you act ugly in the outcomes and you really didn't mean to.
Yeah, yeah. And even hearing you speak before of mental challenges at time and for you to be giving in this merciful way, maybe the gift is just you being able to experience love and joy and being having peace of mind and peace of heart and soul, where maybe it would be harder if you weren't doing that. So, like you're saying, who knows what it is, but for you to be full in richness of love and God and humanity, I think That's the greatest gift that we could ever really get, even though it doesn't show up in the bank account or the mother's acknowledgement of it may not be there. But I think in the end, she wants you to be a happy, at peace person ultimately. Because even if you look at people, if you play it out, like if she's like, no, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, you're like, okay, well, what happened if I did that? Then this would happen. What happened if I do that? Oh, you'd be happy. You're like, okay, but I am happy, right? So I think sometimes there is the confusion again of what people may want. In the end, they're looking for what you're getting by being a merciful, loving person. I
Well,
think
it's
that's
interesting you said, Jonathan, because when it comes sometimes being called like the Mercy Queen or when it's sometimes being called, I think I have a friend at work and he loves me a lot, but he's always kind of like, because I'm also trying to pretty much line myself up to doing a TEDx talk pretty soon. I'm trying to apply. I worked with Wise Whisper Agency, Ashley Stahl, to apply for my first TEDx talk. And when you're saying, like, maybe that I'm full, it's actually not the case. And when I call myself a messy Muslim in the sense, like, I'm filled with mistakes and I'm filled with sometimes having to fight for mercy for myself. And so part of sometimes people think like, "Oh," and I think it's a flaw in thinking because sometimes, like, you have the parent who's like was an alcoholic and they're telling their kid not to drink. The kid's gonna be like, Ma, you're a hypocrite. You're an alcoholic. Why are you telling me not to drink?" Good advice is good advice. For example, like a yellow belt can teach you something just as a black belt can. Kung Fu Panda has got something to offer. So does, the Mantis. And Uruguay's got something on a different level to offer. It's
mm.
Uruguay, right? And so I think sometimes the funny thing that I hate to bring up Kung Fu Panda and
No,
this,
no, no.
but I think Kung Fu Panda is like the funniest version of like, right? And he
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't know. He said
No, no. I
Kung
think
Fu
there's a lot of
Panda
wisdom there.
it
There's a
is
lot
a
of
spiritual. I love
yeah,
Kung Fu Panda. But
yeah.
the
It's
point that I'm
awesome.
trying to say, my son calls me Kung Fu Panda, and I'm like, please don't call me a fat
Yeah,
panda. But sometimes being able to laugh at
yeah,
even like the complications of like the standard. Because when you said like, oh, you're so full and you're so enlightened, I am sure as
mm,
hell not. I am the opposite
yeah.
of that. I am a student of my own journey, and sometimes me trying to offer the kindness and love I'm trying to offer is me also reminding myself to a point that people got to smack me in the ass and be like, you know what I'm saying? And I'm only saying that
Yeah.
because out of humility, because if people think sometimes that someone's got it all together, I think that's always a farce. And I think being honest to that is what makes me the Mercy Queen. Is not that I'm trying to pretend that I'm this elite, knowledgeable human being that has all the answers. I'm living just like you are, making mistakes like everyone else and trying to navigate my way home just like everyone else. You know what I mean?
I can totally relate and understand. And also, I just for my own personal clarification, what I see and feel is your intention of it, going back to your dad. And so, even like, let's just say if someone has a mental illness, maybe sometimes they can't even access that at all. And so, for you, maybe the mercy that you're receiving as your reward, for lack of better words, from God is that you're even able to consciously work on this intention of wanting to love. And because sometimes people, and I know my own experience, we've all had this where you can't even sense the light at all that it exists in you. And so even maybe that's just you being the mercy queen is the mercy you're receiving to even practice being merciful. And that may
I mean,
be a
honestly,
gift.
Jonathan, I say this in no jest. I've attempted suicide 3 times and failed by overdosing. Even 7 months ago, I did. And so people are like, well, how can you talk about mental health and pretend you're an expert? And I have to tell people that as someone who is diagnosed bipolar, I have pretty much, in my humble opinion, taken almost every freaking medication in that book. I've taken Depakote, I've taken lithium, I've taken Zyprexa, I've taken Abilify, I've taken Tegretol. List goes on and on. And of course, I've had trembling hands. Of course, I've had hair loss. Of course, I've had weight gain. Of course, I've had blurred vision. Of course, I've had slurred speech. And sometimes going through all these pain and trying to figure out what cocktail eventually worked to now taking no cocktail at all, right?
Wow.
So now my mom is like, God, Shabana, like, you got to go take the injection in your ass because I don't think you're right. And I'm like, Mom, like, I'm really sorry, but I have now found other ways. And when I have friends who are suffering from depression and they come to me, or people who may even want coaching for someone who's going through a manic episode in the community, and they'll come ask me, like, Shabana, like, what do I do? And I'll be like, they need medication.
Mhm.
And then someone who will be sitting with me who may even have the illness will be like, well, if you're saying you're off medication, why can't I do that? And I have to tell them, well, I've gone through the 25 years of homework. I've gone through the 25 years of therapy. I've gone through CBT. I've gone through DBT. I've suffered the pain of experiencing every medication and side effect. And
Mhm.
sometimes the problem with mental health when you're going through all these things, if you seek help from something that is now causing blurred vision or weight gain, and you were skinny once and now you're blowing up, which is exactly what happened to me in my first manic episode. I ended up taking Zyprexa and I blew up from 130 to 170 within weeks, right? Not knowing
Wow.
because I'm just eating, right? Then I'm like depressed afterwards. I'm like, what the hell happened here? And not to really go off topic, but in saying all this, to kind of explain sometimes that, suffering is hard when you said to me, it triggered all this to me because when you said that if you can't find the light, what do you do? Right? If you're so dark, and I've been that dark before. And what I've done sometimes in error is try to give up. And then God's like, nope, not your time. And the reason when answering that really profound thought that you made is what if you don't feel? I think sometimes what I realize is feeling the value or the light or the desire is sometimes not as important as the balance between movement and stillness.
Mm.
And I say that in a poem that was created by Dana Fault from Kundalini Yoga. In the last part of the poem, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it basically says in the end, I finally allowed myself to feel.
Mm.
And sometimes maybe your feeling of that darkness or that the complete, like, I can't move or I can't breathe or I'm not worthy, maybe just learning that being okay with that sentiment, letting that sit in and not being afraid to cry it out or rage it
Mm.
out in a positive way without harming somebody else needs to be okay.
Mhm.
And once you maybe are able to even sit with that feeling, that's where maybe the evolutionary journey that can make that darkness turn into light.
Very profound. This is what's very present. Let me trust this, that I'll get through it. And by trusting that and going through it, that something opens up, whatever that next thing is, just like we were talking about before, when you're like, hey, right now, dancing's a thing that's going to help me. Or right now, taking a nap, giving ourselves that space. And I think that same thing would be of, wow, I'm feeling really sad. Okay. Well, let yourself feel that for a moment and trust that there's life after that. There's life through that. And not feeling like, okay, if I let myself feel this, then for the rest of my life, I'm going to feel only this. I think it's a great reminder because for a lot of people, it's a huge generalization, but a lot of guys in particular feel like we shouldn't feel our feelings. We just got to be strong and put on this pose. And then inside, things are just really unstable, but the pose is seemingly stable.
People walk around posing all the time. I think sometimes even when I'm at work, I might be like, "Hi, how are you?" and serving people in the hospital setting, and I might be really sad or something's going on with me, but I'm putting on
Mm,
the, "Hey, how are you? How can I help you?" And I think sometimes being able to just sometimes say to someone, "Hey, I'm not really having a good day today," and not feel even that one person that you trust or just alerting someone. And sometimes I'll be honest with you, for someone who's been in the patient care field, also in a hospital setting, performing mammograms for many, many years, there's so many enlightened conversations. And there's days where a patient would even notice and they'd be like, I'd say, "Hey, how are you?" And one of them once said, "You asked me how I am. How are you?" And I
mm,
actually started to cry and she gave me a
uh,
hug. She left me with, you don't have to try so hard to pretend because I could tell that maybe you're having a bad day and it's okay. And so sometimes in human interaction, I'm a patient care provider, but someone was offering generosity of care and noticing me. And that's also when I'm telling people that if you're feeling bad, sometimes knowing that your sorrow can be a seed to help someone else that may need it.
yeah.
And you can plant something for someone else that can grow a garden. Definitely. I really just hope that people who might be down or be suffering, especially the world in general, that can just try to just do our best to just offer light in our daily practice, not judge it. Because I think the hardest thing is when people are judgmental.
Definitely. And when you were speaking, I was experiencing like this exchange of like if somebody, let's say the day you were feeling down, and by you even a little bit letting it out so the person could feel it or whatever it may be, you're allowing this on some level. And for that person, for them to be able to notice it and to hug, maybe help them as much as you because they're getting to experience love and sharing mercy. And so I think there is this natural wave of life if we trust it, that even if the wave's going up and we're feeling down, that's okay. Like we can ride the waves and not fight the current, but also be authentic with what's happening with us. And I think that's kind of like this dance of the inner and the outer, because how do we take care of our inner well being while we navigate the world where The person to the left may be in the opposite end of the spectrum of you. The person over here may want to run and you got to take a nap. And so, how do we navigate all that? So, with all that being said, do you feel there's a human purpose of life?
I think the human purpose of life is to perfect our inner light. And in perfection of your inner light, I was talking to a friend about this really late at night, but one of my favorite movie lines of all time is from the movie The Color Purple, when the daughter of the minister takes all those people to the minister church. But basically, in the movie, there's a woman who's a dancer, is considered a little bit of like a harlot kind of thing. She's one of the people that Whoopi Goldberg ends up really kind of manifesting a lot of admiration for.
Hmm.
And in the movie, it's kind of a side story of how somehow, because she's now singing in a place of what her father in the church feels to be an obscenity. And she used to be a church girl. She loved her father, right? And now she's gone into this crowd, of lewdness and interpretation of faith. And in the moment of she starts walking and she starts singing God's praises. And then she hugs her father and she says, Daddy, even sinners have souls.
Hmm.
And I think there's so much in that. Even the movie, for example, back in the day when Footloose came out, it was all about the church and being able to dance and not being told not to dance. And so even my uncle, for example, has a song that's very famous in India. It's almost like as big of an Elvis Presley song called Jum Barabar Jum Sharabi, which means drink, drunk, or drink. And Muslims may not even listen to it, but the chorus of the song, like the actual lyrics of the song, is different from the chorus where people who are in parties drink. And my uncle, before he died, said, "This is the song that made me famous. This is the song that people remember my name for." But if you listen to the lyrics of the song, some of the lyrics are like this, and it's a Sufi like kind of song. But he says that pundit and a sheikh, which is like the priest, like a sheikh and a pundit, they're like the Hindu priest, and the sheikh will not enter the premise of an alcoholic gathering, right? And it's such a profound statement because you're basically saying that someone who's of a certain level of propriety and saintliness and godliness is not going to enter the strip club. It's not going to enter the poker, right?
Hmm.
So there's a sinner and there's what's considered maybe a saint. And I think that's where I kind of just love being me because I don't judge, number one, people. I sometimes judge myself harder than people,
Hmm.
but I also kind of really believe in just kind of the concept of that a sinner can become a saint, but even saintdom could be overrated. So if you're a saint, like, so what? And if you're a sinner, so what? Right?
Hmm.
To rank people that way, it's like we're people. And there shouldn't be, as much as there might be some great awe for what can be considered a saint, there should not necessarily be also a great disgust for what we could be considered a sinner
Hmm.
either. I know that's a very longer discussion, but I think that's sometimes where I sense the credibility of spirituality and God, because God knows what other people don't, and He sees
Hmm.
what other people don't see. You know what I mean?
I think that each person is on, let's just call it their unique spiritual journey. And I think one of the most amazing moments is when we realize, hey, how do we have our intention to expand our light? And within that, give ourselves mercy and love and compassion to take care of and heal things within us that need loving and healing by accepting that as God's love, as however that love may come in. But to know that moment when you're like, oh, now my life has real purpose of nurturing the light and sharing the light as opposed to trying to become something on the outside as my goal.
You know, it's interesting though, but one of the ways that I kind of heal, which is kind of stupid, is number one, I'm honest about my mistakes to God and myself. It doesn't mean that I have to display them all over the place, but I'm honest. But another
Hmm.
thing is I laugh about them. I actually laugh about it. Like kind of like the Kung Fu Panda concept. And the reason I laugh about him, it's my 18-year-old son gave me that gift. There were sometimes times in the car where I would be belittling myself and, oh my God, like catastrophizing. And he would start joking and he'd make me laugh. And I'm like, you're joking about something really serious. But then when he made me laugh about something, the cure was in the laughter and not only admitting the mistake, but then being able to laugh about it in a way
Hmm.
that kind of humanizes it. Because we're so serious about the black and white of doctrine and just why not sometimes laugh it off and be like, okay, I messed up. Okay. I done did
Hmm.
that. Shoot, I'm so sorry to God, forgive me. It's morning. Okay.
Yeah,
And because
totally. Yeah.
being able to not only laugh at it in a way that I'm not trying to say to laugh at things that are really hard. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying about the little daily mistakes that we beat ourselves up for that shouldn't govern our metric of saintliness or sinfulness.
Yeah. And I think laughter is a beautiful expression of life. I love so many times throughout the day, I just started having like these laughing jags in random places because when you get tickled, it's just such a beautiful expression of joy, of laughter. And even if it is at like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like the other day, like my wife and daughter would tell you that if you observe me, they would say that walk my talk, like in throughout the family. And yes, I have human reactions and stuff, but they'd say, oh yeah, he's very committed to loving and being aware. And everything I do, not out of like trying to control things, but it ends up being like a system. Like, oh wow, when I go here, it's natural to put this thing here. And sometimes I see people do funny things in my part of my mind, like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. But this morning I went into the refrigerator to get something and there was a box of like granola in there that I know I was the last one to use it. I was like, oh, I put the granola that usually goes in the pantry in the refrigerator. I was like, I don't remember where I was. It was hysterical. I told my wife, I'm like, guess what I found in the fridge this morning? And she thought right away that it was her. And then she's like, I go, no, I was the last one to use the cereal. We were laughing. Like, that's just a silly moment. But for me, that my life's about love and awareness and mindfulness and all that, to see like, wow, where was I when I put a box of cereal in the fridge instead of the pantry? And so just having that lightness instead of like, oh my gosh, you're a
Yeah.
teacher of mindfulness and you did this, you're bad. I'm like,
Yeah,
whatever, right?
exactly, exactly. No,
Whatever.
people
Yeah.
people do that to me all the time, like, "Oh, like, why would you try to become the mental health expert when you, like, try to commit suicide yourself?" And I'm like, "Well, that's why I'm a mental health expert because 'cause I've done it,"
Exactly.
right? I think that's why people do attack sometimes, and they'll be like, "Why are you trying to?" And I'm like, "I'm not trying to say I have all the answers. I'm trying to say I have questions. Let's talk," you know? I'm
Yeah.
trying to say I have feelings. Let's process.
I do believe people, like whether my own experience in martial arts for many years or personal development, people that are often the best teachers, for lack of better words, are the ones that have to go through every single step to understand. Like somebody may walk in and be able to do a move as one, but if you have to go through step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 just to get to step one because it's too much, you have an understanding that is difficult for someone that just naturally does it to be able to share. And so in my family, there's OCD, there is anxiety, there's bipolar, all these different things. And in my own experience of OCD and anxiety, like I know what it feels like to be consumed by that. And I know that people may have it way worse than that. And so even the moments when I know it felt stronger than anything else, I can speak from my experience of like, yeah, man, that is intense when all you hear or all you feel is that. So if somebody is depressed and someone's like, oh, just drop your mind or whatever. But if you're like, hey, man, I've spent so much time there and we have to find our way, but these are some things that really helped me. It's a different experience than someone telling you the correct medicine, but never taking it themselves.
Used to irritate me when I was really depressed and laying in bed for weeks is if someone would come and say, "Okay, go into the mirror, go to the mirror and say, I am the shit." I'm like, it's not helping. I feel like shit. And another thing they would say was like, or write down like 5 things that you're grateful for. And I'm like, I'm not depressed because I'm not grateful, right? Or they would say, or list like 10 things about yourself that you like. And then I'm just like, I mean, because sometimes like for me, then when people would kind of guide me towards affirmation, it wouldn't really help because they maybe weren't understanding that it's not a lack of gratitude or a lack of desire or motivation that was causing me to remain in bed. It was so much more. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes when people want to offer solutions because they're trying to be kind versus trying to just be present, like you said earlier. And sometimes I've had friends tell me, like, Shabana, I don't want you to fix it or find a solution. I just want you to listen. I just want to be heard. And that taught
Hmm.
me something because sometimes that is fixing it. And sometimes even fixing it, like I have a friend of mine that really has multiple times, despite me being married, has told me how much he's in love with me. And it's like sometimes I have to kind of be like, stop it. But
Yeah.
then sometimes I feel bad because he's the kind of guy that even though he doesn't have a car and he's kind of struggling himself, would like walk like 5 miles to bring me like a frappe or an ice cream if I asked him to. And I don't take advantage of that because I know what his condition is. And I tell him I can't have you do kind things for me like that. But the willing to be kind sometimes also makes me realize like, wait, on one hand, like he's kind of off because he's got all these struggles. But on the other hand, he's extremely sincere and
Hmm.
if I'm gonna sometimes not thank him for his sincerity, then I'm also doing what many people have done to me, which is make me feel like I'm not enough or
Hmm.
undervalued or not cared for. So I've got to balance sometimes being hard love with him to saying thank you. Like, thank you
Hmm.
for wanting to care about me. Thank you for genuinely seeing me and making me feel like I matter when sometimes people in my own family don't. And
Hmm.
making sure that I balance those two are always in my mind because on one hand, I don't want to take advantage of his kindness as people have done to me. And on the other hand, I also want to thank him for his kindness
Mhm.
because people sometimes haven't said thank you to me or even apologized to me. And I think sometimes that's where the human condition lies to where we're at, even with wars, is two brothers that aren't talking for God knows how long. And then their kids aren't talking because mom and dad don't allow the kids to talk.
Mhm.
So if it's in the family unit, where are we going to solve it with war zones? We can't. It's impossible. The ability to evolve, Jonathan, like what even you're doing, is itself evolvement for sure. And it's got to be the little things that you're doing on your daily that's going to manifest that greater change
Mhm.
for all of us.
Yeah, yeah. And there's 2 things that we've brought up about mental health that I think are really important just because I'm not an expert. I try to do the best I can with myself and others, but I think everyone's very unique. And so there's 2 things I want to say that I think are super important. One was just as far as no one knowing what anyone needs, and the best that we can offer is our presence and almost ask or try to sense, but not just come in with trying to fix something because that creates more separation. And the other thing, I had a student that I learned so much from because after many, many years of training with me and learning all these things, she was diagnosed with different mental challenges and put on medication, and she came to me and said, now that I'm on medication, I have the capacity to hear and practice what you've been teaching me for all these years because it was so difficult for me before. And it really hit me of like, we don't know. And so sometimes a medication, sometimes this or that, whatever can allow someone to be able to practice feeling their light and sharing their light and having the sensitivity of what they need and others need as opposed to trying to impose or think we know. And it's enough of a job to try to keep ourselves focusing on light than to think that we know what somebody needs. And I think that sensitivity and humility is so important because it's the truth. But if we don't live that truth, we're interfering with the truth on some level of trying to fix things to make ourselves or the other person feel better instead of being with what is. And so I appreciate
Exactly.
you.
I also want you to know, as the expert ninja, that I am trying at a certain point, hopefully, I'm trying to do a little bit of kind of weight training right now, but eventually, I think next year I want to do martial arts again. I got a yellow belt in jujitsu, but I do definitely want to practice the discipline of a martial art and try to attain a black belt as well. Just because I think martial art, the disciplinary, physical, mind, body presence is not just a physical thing, it's a mental training. So I'm really just excited also just I mean, on a side note to kind of
Yeah,
start one
yeah.
day martial arts as well since you have such expertise in it. So
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing, like anything, if it's taught and practiced in a way that has that intention. But I think movement is really incredible because you can practice spiritual, psychological, and emotional skills through movement, like you do in dance, for example. And then if you're dancing with a partner, let's say there's this connection, but it's like, oh, we're using the music on each other to connect. In martial arts, it can appear that this person is trying to get me and I'm trying to get them. And so that to me is part of the training of how do you show up as a true present, loving human being in the moment and respond accordingly to what's happening. Just like the man that's in love with you, of how do you show up appropriately for you and that person in the way that's serving
yeah.
truth. And
Yeah.
I think martial artists could be a beautiful medium for that.
No, I also think with martial arts too, one of the strongest thing is the ability to have anger but control it, or the ability to be able to kick someone's ass and not do it. So the ability to do it in itself is a power. But then when you attain the mental acuity that, hey, I could do a Kill Bill kind of, I could take you all down, but then sometimes not do it because sometimes knowing the power within you, but then having control over it.
Yeah.
Control and no in the good or the bad of it, because obviously power can come in many frameworks, whether it's money, whether it's physical health, whether it's anything, right? Thank you so much, Jonathan, for giving me the opportunity to be seen and heard, and the value of just being with you today. It meant a lot to me. So
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I always have such love and appreciation and respect for people that are having the intention to love and doing their part to whatever that may mean to do that. And then also these moments to me of coming together with someone that we've never met before, each other, and to be able to share the most important things to us in life is to me always so intimate. And I really value this time so much. So I appreciate your time, and also showing up so fully as you, which I think is always refreshing for anybody to see. Thank you for being part of this Spiritual Ninja podcast. I really appreciate you being here. My goal with the podcast is to share heart to heart, soul to soul conversations. So if you would be so kind to share and to follow, that helps me get the word out about the podcast. Okay. Thank you and hope to see you on another podcast soon.